Welcome, Molly, to the show. Glad to have you here. What's on your mind today? Where do you want to drive?
Oh, thank you for having me, David. I'm so excited to be on your show today. Before we started recording, I was sharing with you what's really hot and heavy on my mind right now is how to hire and recruit and keep good employees right now. Since the pandemic, all across recruiting and staffing land, we have never in the history of time, I've been recruiting for 25 years, have seen an employees market like we are seeing today. It is whether you're in IT, it really doesn't matter. I'm staffing right now in legal, in sales, in marketing, in engineer, and across the nation. It is unbelievable. People don't want to go back to the office. They are demanding more money. They are interviewing employers now more than ever. So, it's just incredible right now of if you are trying to hire, then I have some tips for you. And if you are not in the hiring realm, you are definitely in the employee retention seat, because recruiters will do everything and anything to poach your employees today.
Wow. And are you finding that at the senior levels too, as far as executive positions, or is that kind of more rank and file as far as the staff and then the managerial or supervisor people?
It's all over, anywhere from a receptionist and administrative position. I just placed a seven-figure civil engineer manager level in San Antonio, Texas yesterday. And we have been going at that job for probably 9 weeks right now, trying to find people to get them to either leave. My greatest recruiting tip is I put in the subject of my email, are you happy and are you being treated well? And it's really fascinating. My greatest email responses that I get are from people that say they won't even entertain speaking to me. They're like, I'm super happy, I'm treated well, the culture is great here. And I'll go as far as send an email to the entrepreneur and say, great job, keep it up, whatever you're doing. Your employees won't even talk to me, 10x whatever you're doing, because you have a phenomenal culture.
That's good. Do you ever find when you send that email that they come back and they engage you for some recruiting?
Oh, no, I have not had that, because by and large, I stay away from entrepreneurs. So this is just for finding candidates. I'm not a headhunter. So, but I do have people come and say, hey, can you help me find a job? But that's not the side of my practice.
Yeah, because I was getting the impression that you were really helping people find good people. But you're not doing the recruiting piece. You're not actually making the calls. So how are you helping them find people?
Yeah, I do the calls as well. So step one is really trying to get into people's email box or texting them, what have you, and have them get on the phone with me. So sometimes, you have a phenomenal culture when your team won't even get on the phone with a recruiter to even entertain. They don't care about the money, the benefits, what have you. They're staying for the culture. And by and large, that's really when I interview with people that do get on the phone with me and I say, okay, what's up? Why are you willing to talk to me today? And they'll say, very rarely is it, I'm not being paid enough. They will use words like there's no opportunity for growth here. And I'll really break it down from a coaching perspective and say, tell me your definition of opportunity. What does opportunity look like for you? And when I really peel away the layers of the onion, it's so simple. It comes down to they're working in an organization where they don't get the three basic human needs: time, attention, and feedback. They're willing to make a move or consider interviewing with my entrepreneurs because of the culture that they give, because they do have time, attention, and feedback built into the fabric of their business.
Yeah, I teach my own little recipe for leadership called 3 Strands Leadership. And after you get over the foundation of systematic power, I say the heart of it is meaningful work. And, people have to feel that they're doing something meaningful, but then what holds it all together is that third strand is sincere gratitude that you're doing what you're saying. You're investing time in them. They feel that you value them as a member of the team. And it's not fluff. It's actually sincere. Do you ever find that some of the people you talk to, they say that, I get some attention or whatever, but I don't feel they really care about me sincerely. It's all phony.
Absolutely. I always say to the leadership and to the entrepreneurs, you're responsible for the energy you leave in the room. And so they can tell when you're present, they can tell when you're invested. So often people will say, I'm like, well, tell me, do you have weekly stakeholders meetings? Do you have employee growth plans talking about some of the structure that people are looking for? And they'll say, yeah, but I could tell they're not present. I could tell that it's checking a box, that they, went and took some course or they read some book and they're just operating from a checklist. It's not in their bones. It's not in the fiber of the fabric of this culture of this business.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of people get confused thinking that activity means progress. And so if they're just busy, then they're making progress. Whereas it sounds like in that type of environment that's a bit dysfunctional, that they're missing the boat because they're not engaging their people. So what are you recommending that people do? Then it sounds like you don't just do the recruiting piece, but sometimes you've really got to coach them, lead them to understand how to really build that culture that fully engages people.
Yeah, I say no to more jobs than I say yes. I turn down a tremendous amount of business for that very reason, because they don't have an environment of empowerment. They don't have an environment of coaching. First and foremost, they understand leadership to be, they read the book Traction, or they're operating off of EOS. And like I said, it's not really from a place of empowerment within their business. So when I have a consulting side of my business, anybody that I work with in regards to staffing and recruiting, I make them go through my 66-day onboarding program, because so often people get excited. They go through the recruiting process, go through the hiring process, interviewing process, negotiations, offer letter, things of that nature. And then they hire someone. And then, probably like 15, 20 years ago, I would start to get these emails around week 2, week 3, like, hey, so-and-so's not blah, blah, blah. And I would start to get the emails, and then I would hop on the phone with the manager or their C-level leadership or the entrepreneur and start to ask some really powerful questions. And lo and behold, they hired them and dumped everything in the kitchen sink on their desk and abandoned them. And so I really make people go through from day 1 to day 66 of being employed there, really bring them through my process in regards to team empowerment, and then also making certain that they have clear, concise, well-communicated goals that everybody can clarify, verify, and be in agreement with, because so often that's a missing piece in the communication or the direction. It's really, there's a saying, I think it is, that there's 3 sides to every story: what I said, what you said, and what was really intended.
Yeah, it's funny. I run into a lot of leaders like that, where they say, I got this problem employee. And I think a lot of it is a lack of training. And then also just, we get a lot from the media these days that, it's somebody else's fault, where we get this victim mentality pushed on us. And I always say to leaders, I say, well, I want to say this nicely, but you don't have a problem employee, you have a problem with your leadership. Either you or within your team, because somebody's breaking down on one of the 4 management disciplines: how you hire, how you manage, how you develop, and how you retain. Because you decided to hire the person, and it sounds like you've got an awesome hiring system, just like I do. Probably slightly different recipes, but achieving the same thing. How you manage, if you're not managing them well, you talked about that. They may be going through an EOS process, but they're not fully engaged. So it's phony. Whether they're being developed, you brought that up. And then whether you retain them. If they're not working out, why are they on your team? If you're doing the other 3 things right, then why are they on your team? I don't know. Do you run into that where people are complaining to you about one of their people on their team, but actually they were doing everything reasonably well on the first 3 disciplines, but they just kept them even though the person wasn't performing, and they kept them way too long?
Yeah, I do run into that. I do want to touch on your first, the three disciplines. I think that starts even before the leadership, and it really starts with their mindset. So often it's the mindset. And what I find before comes even the leadership is the lack of trust. I could pick that up in a hot minute when I'm on the phone with someone. I'm like, all right, tell me about what have you done in the past with hiring, firing, training, and onboarding? What's worked? What hasn't worked? And I get really still and present and listen. And so often at the core of that is lack of trust. I think it was Crucial Conversations, one of my favorite books that really talks about that. First Among Equals. Many of the books speak about that. In the core of it is the lack of trust within them. They're expecting disappointment before they even hire someone. They're already subconsciously, I can't tell you how many people, I'm like, you're already expecting disappointment. You're just waiting for the other shoe to drop with the team that you have on board and every person that you've hired and that you're going to continue to hire. And guess what? Whatever you expect, you're going to get. So I do find people that keep people on way too long. And a lot of times I've written chapters in my books about the good enough employee. It's just amazing when you finally muster up that courage to have that courageous conversation and be like, no, it's not working out. There is this phenomenon that happens. The employee starts performing. It's almost like they have their spidey sense. And so often I'll have this coaching conversation with the entrepreneur, the C-level manager, and we'll talk about how to make it short, how to facilitate the conversation, what have you. And then I don't hear I'm like, all right, send me an email as soon as you finish the conversation. Let me know that you completed it. I don't hear from them. Then probably 3, 4, 5 weeks later, they call me back. They're like, it's just crazy. They started showing up. They started really doing their job. And it happens so often. And I think a lot of times, trust me, hiring employees is the most painful. There's this saying in the business world, business would be great, but for the employees. And the employees say business would be great, but for the clients. I can't get my work done because the clients are always bothering me. It's such a vicious cycle. And I mean, honestly, I understand it. It's expensive. It takes a tremendous amount of time and resources to kind of go back into the battlefield, if you will, to go and find people. So you start tricking yourself and just focusing on the things that they're doing good enough. And you don't want to go back and hire someone and then have to retrain them. I hear that so often.
Yeah. And do you find that when they give that person that spark where they start showing up, they start working well, that works all the time, or do they break down and they don't follow up? Because I found that with some of my clients is they can have that initial meeting. It's like, wow, this person's doing great. I did what you said. And then they think they're done. And the leadership goes off and does other stuff. And once again, that employee doesn't feel like they're getting the attention. And they also have to build new habits to do well. And they don't have the habits. They just had an idea.
Yes, I do find that. And, I always tell the entrepreneur, the common denominator is you. If there's one finger that you're pointing at someone else, there's 4 pointing back at you. And it always starts at the leadership. So they could show up and start to perform or what have you. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to give them a little bit of time here, what have you. But then you don't change your habits as a leader and you still negate having the crucial conversation. So you don't know if it was a one and done or what have you. So your habits, you have to strengthen that muscle of firing people.
Yeah. Yeah. And the follow through for the people that don't need to be fired, just that once you give them the idea of the new habit or train it, you got to help them build it because it takes, some people say 60, 66 days. I like Charles Duhigg, who says 90 days. It takes a while to get that habit and that process in place. I'd like to go back to your comment about trust. So this thing where leaders, basically, you get what you expect, I think you said, and they don't trust people from the get-go. Where do you think that comes from?
They're probably picking from their past. They've been burned before. So often I'll hear from people when I say, tell me what you've done in the past, what's worked, what have you. we all have core wounds around that, from people that have burned us, they haven't delivered, whether it's an independent contractor or marketing agency or whatever you have hired in the past. And I think they're holding on to that story so often, number one. But number two is that they're not looking inward, first and foremost, to see what role they played in that. And so when you consistently get burned, or people do not show up and over deliver what they promise, so there's so many different sides to that. It could be lack of project management, lack of accountability, lack of consequences, lack of deadlines. There's so much that can go to that. So when I see people that lead with lack of trust, I mean, there could be a whole psychology side of it, but by and large in the business world, it's because they didn't have the structures. They did not have the processes in place. They didn't have the project management in place. And as entrepreneurs, it was always delegated back up to you to be able to facilitate and to lead everything. So the lack of trust comes from, it just feels like constant chaos and people don't do what they say they're going to do. And from my experience, it's basically from a missing framework of having somebody else be your accountability cop and your project manager. That's the quickest way to really figure out if it's something else that's deeper.
Well, and isn't it almost a habit on the part of the leader to blow it off and play the blame game? And if it is, or something similar, how do you help them comprehend really that there's a piece they need to own and how they need to work on it?
Yeah, in my experience, it's not even necessarily the blame game, so to speak. It's just that they don't have the rule book for how to have an adult crucial conversation without it blowing up, number one. And then number two, they don't have the tools for how to turn it around and do a turnaround. So often when entrepreneurs call me, they'll just bury their head in the sand. They know they have problems. They know they're tolerating stuff within their business, whether it's a breakdown in their people, their process, their production, their profit, wherever it may lie. My experience is that they don't know how to, I'm so constantly shocked. And by and large, my business is working with lawyers. And working that, how many lawyers, like you've seen lawyers playing them on TV, what have you, litigating in the courtroom, just crushing it, total sharks, but they will just crumble when it comes time to have a conversation with the receptionist they're paying $16 an hour to. I'm like, what is going on here? And really, I think at the deep seat of it is because they have heart. And they feel bad if they have to let somebody go, or they're going to have a conversation. So often what I will hear is, I can't handle another person in my office in a pile of tears. I can't handle it. I can't handle all the flood of emotions. I don't know what to do with it. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not equipped to handle this. So they sort of freeze, in my experience, or bury their head in the sand. By and large, from a human side of it, more so than an entrepreneurial side of it, is what I see.
Yeah, it almost sounds like that reptilian response of either fight or flight is what you're describing. And but either way, in both those responses or reactions, so they're more reactions, I would say, they're not dealing with the issue. So how do you get them to look at, I agree, a big part of it's process and missing process. But there's also that personal part where they haven't been owning that they're part of the problem, and so they can't fix it. How do you get them to own that? Because that can be a delicate conversation. And with the person who's the fighter, it's probably a different conversation than the person who's taking flight. And as you said, kind of hiding their head in the sand, they're avoiding the whole issue. How do you get them to open up?
Yeah, I love that fight or flight. And I see it three ways. It's fight, flight, or freeze. And in my experience, it's usually the middle of that, crazy eight, where most people freeze and do nothing at all. And but I would say how I get them to is very simple. And you and I kind of had a conversation about this a bit ago, is that I have them Instead of doing employee reviews, I've done a ton of presentations written about in my books how the employee review must die. And the reason being because it is so archaic, it's so stressful for the entrepreneur, for the business owner, for the leader, because they're like, all right, either you're going to get a raise, you're not going to get a raise. The employee feels like their head's on the chopping block just by the name performance review. It already comes with a tremendous amount of underbelly anxiety. So I flip it to having your employees on an employee growth plan. And that's how I fix it. And that's how I tell them, like, listen, you got to start implementing your growth plans, which in by and large is from day one when you hire them, everybody's on one every 30 days up to 120 days. And then it goes to quarterly. Every employee's on a quarterly employee growth plan. And so how you start to have the conversations, you start to build the muscle, and then you build it into the structure and the standardization within your practice, which basically the employee does a self-evaluation of their role, of the company, of where they see opportunity. And then the manager, supervisor, whatever term you want to resonates with you, they do an evaluation of the employee. And then you come together and treat it as a coaching conversation. And then you're constantly anchoring to their top three top revenue or opportunity producing activities. And it's something that you're revisiting every single week in your weekly stand-up stakeholders meetings. So you keep it off the shelf. Nobody's ever surprised. So when you have to have that conversation, and you have to look at yourself too, of where you might be part of the problem, it's very clear. If you have trust and you make it safe within your practice, and you'll know this is how you'll know if it really truly is you, because you'll start to get these reviews or, growth plans, and you'll sit down and look at it and they give one-word answers. They're rating everything rather average. There's not a whole lot of elaboration. And when I facilitate that for a lot of my clients that I serve as a fractional CEO, and I look at it, I'm like, I get 5 of them from employees, and they don't have much on the paper, so to speak. When people are writing a book and pouring their heart and giving you their feedback, the good, the bad, the ugly, the exciting, and things of that nature, that's when you know you've created a safe culture.
Yeah, I'm totally on the same page. I kind of use different verbiage, but in my first book, Success with People, I wrote back in like 2005, what I did was I said that, as you have stated, performance reviews in a traditional sense of once a year we're going to whack somebody are very unproductive. And so I changed the name to halftime reviews. So I said, I want you to consider that you've got a team, and each individual on that team has a role to play for the team to win. And everybody's clear on that. When I was coaching youth sports towards the end of it, I found that my most successful approach with a group of 13-year-old boys playing soccer, or girls for my daughter, was I would give each player one thing to do during the game. I want you to do this one thing. And then at halftime, I would say, okay, how are you doing on your one thing? And so the halftime review is more positioned like what you're saying. First of all, the beautiful thing, what you said that I've said too, no surprises. There shouldn't be any surprise in the review, whether you're doing it in 30 days or every quarter or once a year, whatever it is. And that's because you have this regular communication going on. And so there's no surprises. It's a reaffirmation. It's a coming together. It's a bonding. It's okay, what's working and what's not. John Maxwell told the story of being with the coach of the Tennessee Vols basketball team. What was her name? Was Pat something. And she then had to retire because she got something going on with her brain that was taking her down. But she was the winningest coach ever in women's NCAA basketball. And he got to go in with the team at halftime, and she wasn't even there. She was like being interviewed or something. One of the players walked up to a whiteboard, drew 2 lines down the whiteboard, and titled it Good, Bad, Change, and led the discussion on the game plan for the team. What are we doing good? What are we doing bad? What do we need to change to win the game? And that's the type of halftime review you should have, kind of like what you're indicating. If there's only one-word answers, they're not engaged, or they're afraid. It's not safe. Whereas if they come in and you can help them lead the discussion versus you're doing all the talking, then you've got a strong relationship, strong culture there. Am I hearing you right?
Entrepreneurs in an entrepreneur's world. And I speak very much like that. Their name might not be on the door. They don't have any financial capital at stake, but they definitely have heart and soul that's invested. They use terminology like our clients. They use terminology like we. They have behaviors such as if the leader is not available for the stakeholders meeting or for the halftime, that they actually step up to the whiteboard and they start leading. They're constantly connected to the mission, vision, and core values. They know what true north is. It's in everybody's blood. So if the leader's taken, absent or at an interview or what have you, we don't miss a beat. We don't crumble. We don't fall apart.
Well, that's what I've found is great with strong cultures that actually don't have the values just on the wall, but people memorize them, they live them, is that people feel safe making decisions and driving things as long as it's consistent with the values, because they know them and they know they can live them. And if something goes wrong, they can say, well, I did this because our value is X. And then they're okay.
Yeah. It's interesting. I just released a podcast 2 weeks ago that was titled Your Core Values Are a Lie. And so often when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, I'm like, all right, talk to me about your core values. And they'll, pick some really buzzy words from quotes that they saw at TJ Maxx home, and they have them all over their walls, like an empowered team and what have you. And then, they'll come to me, or they'll say family first. And then they'll come to me and their complaints are that so-and-so leaves at 5:00 on the dot every day. And so when I really break it down, like one of my core values in my company, my very first one is courageous conversations. You're never going to find that on a quote at TJ Maxx. It's going to just beautifully hang on the wall when we walk in. Another one of ours is brutal honesty. So you have to be really clear and stop picking other people's core values and what yours are. So often when I ask people that, talk to me about your top core values, and they tell me, I'm like, that's not true. That is not your core values at all. So no wonder you're having so many troubles.
But the test I use is I say, okay, who can tell me your mission statement from memory? And I'll be in a room full of leaders. They'll just be silent. Who can tell me your vision statement from memory? Silence. Yes. And even high level values. Can you just give me the high level value? Maybe not the statements underneath. And so I find that can be a test also. So it sounds like you're doing some awesome stuff, Molly. Where is your core focus today? Is it more doing the consulting piece, or is it really helping entrepreneurs or businesses find great people because it's such a tough market right now?
My core unique ability is definitely the coaching side of things. I love to be a consultant and kind of get in there and just rip apart everything. It's like, pulling out the junk drawer and putting it on the kitchen table and sorting it all out. But I think that goes hand in hand with the hiring side as well. I have a team of recruiters that I have personally coached and trained to recruit from a place of mindset, from a place of emotional intelligence, and, not getting seduced by the resume, but remembering that you're hiring human beings versus human doings. So I really am very, very passionate about working with heart-centered entrepreneurs and C-level leaders and supporting them with creating entrepreneurs in an entrepreneur's world.
The image I get in my mind is that you're like kind of the minimalist that gets hired to go in to help the hoarder who's got all these bad habits and they have all this junk. And you go in and you say, okay, this isn't generating revenue, or this is destroying culture, and we're going to go in this direction. And that sounds really exciting. So where can people, I've really enjoyed the discussion. Where can people go to learn more about what you do and maybe how to connect with you?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me, David. This is, we could talk all day about this. I love this.
Yeah.
It's just so great. So my website is hiringandempowering.com. And the easiest way is to subscribe. I drop a new podcast every single Tuesday, value add I'd like to speak into both the employee to get them to a place of stepping up in lead as well as the entrepreneur. And every Thursday, I drop a blog as well. I've been blogging every single week since 2008 and haven't missed a week. So that's the easiest way to, yeah, I'd love to just give a tremendous amount of value and tips and techniques. Because listen, this world of leadership and entrepreneurship is not for the weak.
No, it's not. And that could be a whole nother podcast because we've got such a leadership problem in America on the political side, and we don't have to dive into politics, but thank God we have entrepreneurs and
Yes.
that we have some coaches out there, really thousands of coaches who are sincerely trying to help our business leaders at all levels, trying to be the best that they can be. So I applaud what you're doing, and I encourage people to check out your website and learn more.
Thank you for having me.